The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the 30th floor of the office building on Fifth Avenue, where Thomas Anderson had built his real estate empire over 5 decades of relentless negotiations. At 78 years old, his wrinkled hands trembled slightly as he signed the last contract of the day, yet another skyscraper that would rise from the New York soil as a monument to his insatiable ambition. The office, decorated with mahogany furniture and paintings by renowned American artists, reflected the refined taste of someone who had transformed every square inch of the city into a profit, opportunity. "Mr. Anderson, you have a call," announced his secretary, Mrs. Smith, a woman in her 60s who had worked for him for over 2 decades. Her voice carried that professional courtesy he knew well, respectful yet distant, as if there were an invisible wall between them. "Who is it?" Thomas grumbled, not lifting his eyes from the papers scattered across the mahogany desk. "It's your daughter Christina, sir. She said it's urgent." The businessman sighed heavily, feeling the familiar weight of tension that always arose when one of his children reached out. These were not calls of affection or longing, always problems, demands, or worse, that polite coldness that hurt more than any shout. "Thomas!" Christina's voice sounded metallic through the phone, using his first name instead of Dad, as she always did. "I need to talk to you about the nursing home." "What nursing home? What are you talking about?" Thomas straightened in his leather chair, feeling a pang of apprehension. "Golden Haven. It's where you will stay. Robert and I have already decided. It's best for everyone. The doctor said you can't live alone anymore after that episode with high blood pressure last week." The key words hit Thomas like punches to the stomach. The episode had been a moment of weakness when he felt dizzy during a meeting and had to lean on the table to avoid falling. Nothing more than that. But his children, Christina, 45, and Robert, 42, had turned it into a social death sentence. "You can't decide this for me. I built this company from scratch, manage a fortune worth billions, and you think I can't take care of myself?" Thomas's voice rose, echoing off the office walls. "Dad!" "Thomas," Christina quickly corrected herself. "You're 78 years old. That apartment is too big. You hardly eat properly, and we don't even know if you're taking your medications. Golden Haven is the most luxurious place in New York for people your age. You will have all the necessary care." "Care?" Thomas repeated bitterly. "You mean surveillance. You want to shove me into a retirement home to be rid of me once and for all." "It's not like that." Christina's voice sounded tired. "Robert and I have our own families, our jobs. We can't watch you 24 hours a day. And since Mom passed away, you've been different." Helen, the name of his deceased wife, gone for 8 years, still provoked a sharp pain in Thomas's chest. She had been the only person capable of breaking his hardness, of making him smile genuinely. When cancer took her, something inside him died along with her. "Your mother has nothing to do with this," Thomas murmured, but he knew it was a lie. After Helen's death, he had become even more reclusive, more bitter, pushing his children away with his coldness. "Mr. Johnson from Golden Haven will come to pick you up tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Robert and I have already packed your essential things. The rest can stay in the apartment for now." "For now? Are you going to sell my house?" "It's an apartment, Thomas, not a house. And yes, eventually it will make sense to sell it. You won't need it anymore." The call ended abruptly, leaving Thomas alone with the sound of the rain and the echo of his own heavy breathing. He looked out the window at the city he had helped build. Those mirrored buildings reflecting the afternoon lights were, in part, his creation. But now, at 78 years old, he would be removed from that, seen like a disposable piece. That night, Thomas walked through the duplex apartment in Greenwich Village that he had bought for Helen 30 years earlier. Every room held memories he had tried to bury. the living room where she read her favorite American novels, the kitchen where she prepared her famous pot roast on Sundays, the rooftop garden where she cultivated her orchids. The walls seemed to whisper stories of a time when he still knew how to smile. In the couple's bedroom, he stopped in front of Helen's wardrobe, which Christina and Robert had left untouched. The clothes still carried her subtle jasmine scent. Thomas picked up a yellowed photo from the bedside table. The family gathered on the last Christmas they spent together. Helen was beaming. The children looked genuinely happy, and he was there, serious as always, but with softer, more human eyes. "How did we get to this point, Helen?" he whispered to the photo. "How did I lose our children? How did I become this man they want to hide in a nursing home?" Tears came without warning, sliding down his time-worn cheeks. Thomas Anderson, the real estate mogul who had never shown weakness in decades of brutal negotiations, cried alone in the empty room, holding the photo of a family he barely recognized as his own. The next morning, Thomas dressed in his most elegant suit, a navy blue Oxford that Helen had chosen for him years ago. If he was being forced to leave his life behind, at least he would maintain his dignity. When Mr. Johnson arrived, a burly 50-year-old man with an overly professional smile, Thomas greeted him with the same haughty posture he used in business meetings. "Mr. Anderson, it's an honor to welcome you to Golden Haven," Johnson said, extending his hand. "I'm sure you'll find that, sir, you will feel very comfortable in our residence." "Residence?" Thomas repeated with irony. "Is that what you call it?" "It's the most exclusive senior living home in New York, sir. Our residents are all successful individuals like yourself. Business people, doctors, lawyers. You will be among peers." During the drive to Golden Haven, located in an upscale neighborhood, Thomas watched New York pass by the window of the black Mercedes. The city pulsed with life, people rushing to work, children heading to school, vendors selling their goods at street corners. All that vital energy he no longer belonged to. Golden Haven was truly impressive, a complex of 3 low-rise buildings surrounded by lush gardens, with a gym, pool, library, and game room. Mr. Johnson made a point to show every detail, talking about the 24-hour medical staff, specialized physiotherapists, and cultural activities. "And here is your apartment," he announced, opening the door to a spacious and well-decorated suite. 2 bedrooms, a large living room, a balcony overlooking the garden. You can bring your personal furniture, your decorations. Thomas entered slowly, smelling fresh paint and cleaning products. Everything was very clean, very organized, very impersonal. From the balcony, he saw other seniors walking through the gardens or sitting on benches, some accompanied by nurses. "How long do people usually stay here?" Thomas asked. "Well," Mr. Johnson hesitated, "our residents consider this place their permanent home, Mr. Anderson. It's a transition to a more peaceful life." Peaceful. Thomas understood the euphemism. It was a place to await death with comfort and dignity, away from the inconveniences that represented for hurried families, a golden deposit for hearts that had already beaten for too long. While Mr. Johnson continued his speech about the wonders of Golden Haven, Thomas approached the window and saw a scene that intrigued him. A young black woman, appearing to be under 20, pushing a cleaning cart through the garden while cradling a tiny baby in her arms. The child wore a pink onesie and waved her little arms in the air as if dancing. "Who is that young woman?" Thomas asked, interrupting Mr. Johnson's presentation. "Ah, that's Lisa. A special situation. She works in cleaning, and due to difficult personal circumstances, we allow her to bring her daughter during her shift. It's an exception we make out of charity." "Charity," Thomas murmured, observing how the young woman worked with determination even while carrying the child. There was something familiar in her posture, the same stubbornness he recognized in himself. the refusal to bend in the face of difficulties. That night, on his first night at Golden Haven, Thomas sat in the armchair on the balcony and looked at the stars he could barely see through the light pollution of New York. The silence was different there, not the empty silence of his apartment, but the silence filled with lives on pause, with stories coming to an end. But there was something more in that place, something he couldn't quite define yet. Perhaps it was the laughter of the baby he had heard earlier echoing through the halls, or the determined way the young mother pushed her cart despite holding the child. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a pang of curiosity about someone else's life. And that was how the transformation of a heart that believed itself irreparably hardened by time and loss began. The first month at Golden Haven passed in a monotonous routine that Thomas executed with the military precision that had always characterized his business life. He woke up at 6 in the morning, had his black coffee without sugar on the balcony, read the economic newspapers for 2 hours, and then walked through the gardens with the upright posture of someone still commanding board meetings. The other residents greeted him with respectful courtesy. After all, everyone knew who Thomas Anderson was, but they kept a prudent distance from his perpetually stern expression. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," greeted Mrs. Smith, an 82-year-old former teacher who organized the cultural activities at the facility. "Today we will have a lecture on Brazilian literature in the library. Would you like to join?" "No, thank you," Thomas replied curtly, continuing his walk. Mrs. Smith sighed and shook her head, later commenting to her friends that man carried a bitterness that haunted the halls. It was on a sunny April morning when everything changed. Thomas was sitting in his usual spot in the main garden at a wrought-iron table under the shade of a blooming cherry blossom tree when he spilled coffee on his grey suit while reading the Wall Street Journal. The dark stain spread across the English fabric like a mark of failure on his usual precision. "Damn," he muttered, observing the damage. At that moment, he heard hurried footsteps approaching. "Sorry, Mr. Thomas, I'll clean this up for you right away." The young voice, thick with a southern accent, made him look up. Lisa had run over, pushing her cleaning cart with one hand while balancing her daughter in her left arm. She wore the light blue uniform of the facility, a polo shirt and long pants that were slightly too big for her, and had her curly hair tied back in a ponytail that swayed with every movement. Her brown eyes showed genuine concern that contrasted with the mechanical courtesy of the other staff. "You don't need to bother," Thomas grumbled, embarrassed to have been caught in a moment of carelessness. "Of course I do. You'll get all stained," Lisa said, already pulling a clean cloth from the cart. "Can you hold Emily for me, please?" Before Thomas could protest, the 6-month-old baby was placed in his stiff arms. Emily wore a yellow dress with small embroidered flowers, clearly handmade with great care, and had the same expressive eyes as her mother, but with golden flecks that sparkled in the light filtered through the leaves of the cherry blossom. As Lisa energetically cleaned the table and tried to remove the stain from his suit, Emily gazed at Thomas. With that unfiltered curiosity typical of babies, her chubby little fingers reached out to touch the wrinkled face of the businessman, and then it happened. A smile. Not just any smile, but that kind of toothless and utterly pure smile that only a child can produce, free of ulterior motives, fears, or judgments. In that moment, something broke inside Thomas. It was as if a crack had opened in the concrete wall he had built around his heart during decades of ruthless business dealings. The baby continued to smile, babbling incomprehensible yet melodious sounds, while her tiny hands gently touched the face of the man who hadn't smiled at anyone in months. "There! I managed to get almost all the stain out," announced Lisa, interrupting the magical moment. "Sorry for putting her on your lap without warning. I needed both hands free and—" "No problem," Thomas said, surprising himself with the softness of his own voice. She is beautiful. Lisa stopped putting away the cleaning supplies and really looked at the elderly man for the first time. There was something different in his expression. The hard eyes had softened as he watched Emily, and a hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Thank you. She is the most precious thing I have," Lisa said, extending her arms to take her daughter back. "Emily, say goodbye to Mr. Thomas." The baby waved her little hands in the air, producing more joyful babbling before being transferred back to her mother's lap. As Lisa walked away pushing the stroller, Thomas remained seated for long minutes, unconsciously touching the spot where the child's fingers had touched his face. That night, during dinner in the main dining room, an elegant setting with individual tables and a menu crafted by nutritionists, Thomas found himself thinking about the baby instead of focusing on the financial market numbers he usually reviewed mentally during meals. "Mr. Anderson seems more thoughtful than usual today," commented Dr. Henry, a 75-year-old retired cardiologist sitting at the adjacent table. "Any trouble with business?" "No," Thomas replied, methodically cutting his grilled salmon. "I was thinking about other things." "Ah, I understand. Sometimes our minds wander. I think about my grandchildren who live in Alabama. I only see them during the holidays," Dr. Henry sighed. "Do you have grandchildren?" The question hit Thomas like a punch to the stomach. Christina had never married, dedicating herself entirely to her career as a corporate lawyer. Robert was married, but he and his wife had decided not to have children to focus on their careers and quality of life. Thomas had never questioned these decisions, but now he realized he had never shown any genuine interest in knowing his children's deepest desires. "No," he replied simply, returning his focus to the food. In the following days, Thomas found himself adjusting his schedule to coincide with Lisa's work hours. He started having his morning coffee later, at 8:30 instead of 7, when she usually cleaned the main garden area. He prepared small, improvised toys for Emily, origami birds made from paper napkins, rattles created with plastic bottles and beans, little dolls molded from pieces of bread. "Mr. Thomas, you didn't have to do that," Lisa said one morning, watching him show a paper boat to Emily, who clapped her hands in delight. "Emily already likes you just the way you are." "Likes?" Thomas asked, genuinely surprised. "How do you know?" "Well, just look at how excited she gets when she sees you. Look at her smiling now." Indeed, Emily was gurgling with joy, trying to grab the little boat with her clumsy hands. Thomas found himself laughing, a rough and unfamiliar sound that made Lisa stop sweeping to watch him with curiosity. "It's been a while since I've heard you laugh," she commented. "It's nice to see." The observation embarrassed Thomas, who returned to his usual formal posture. "I don't usually laugh much. It was never my strong suit. Everyone needs to laugh, Mr. Thomas. Even my father, who was as stern as you, laughed when he played with me and my siblings," Lisa said, resuming her sweeping as she spoke. "He used to say that laughter was the cheapest medicine in the world." "Is your father still alive?" "No, sir. He passed away 3 years ago in a work accident. He was a construction worker back in Alabama." Lisa's voice softened. "He taught me that work dignifies a person, no matter what it is. That's why I'm not ashamed to clean floors, you know. Honest work doesn't dishonor anyone." Thomas fell silent, processing those words. His own relationship with work had always been driven by ambition and power, never by the simple dignity that shone through the young woman's voice. He watched as she swept every corner with meticulous dedication, even while carrying Emily in her arms, even knowing that no one was watching her performance. "And what about Emily's mother?" he asked delicately, referring to the child's father. Lisa stopped sweeping and her face hardened slightly. "There is no father. Or rather there is, But he chose not to be a father. When he found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared. He's probably out there having other children he won't take responsibility for. I'm sorry. You don't need to be sorry, Mr. Thomas. Emily and I are fine. We just need the two of us, Lisa said with a firmness that reminded Thomas of his own determination in his years of struggle. I'm going to give her a good life. I'll study again, get a better job. Emily will have everything I didn't have. You studied? I was studying business administration at a local community college with a scholarship from a program. I was only 2 years away from graduating. Lisa's eyes sparkled with a mix of nostalgia and determination. But when Emily was born, I had to stop. I had no one to leave her with, and daycare is very expensive. But I will go back when she's a bit older. Business administration. The coincidence. A bolt of lightning struck Thomas. It was the course he had studied at the local community college decades ago, when he still dreamed of conquering the world. He saw in Lisa the same ambitious spark he had carried in his youth, but tempered with a maternal sweetness he had never possessed. "Is the local community college nearby?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, it's right in Paradise. I took the subway there every day. I loved those classes, you know, especially the business management and marketing ones. I dreamed of having my own company one day." She laughed with a melancholic tone. "Sounds silly now, right? Here I am cleaning floors and dreaming of being a businesswoman." "It's not silly," Thomas said with a firmness that surprised them both. "Dreams are never silly, especially when a person has the determination to make them come true." Lisa looked at him with an intrigued expression, as if she were seeing something new in that grumpy man she had encountered every day for weeks. Emily chose that moment to stretch her little arms toward Thomas, babbling, "Ba, ba, ba," insistently. "I think she wants to go with you again," Lisa smiled. "May I?" Thomas extended his arms and received the baby, who immediately nestled her little head against his chest. The child's gesture of absolute trust awakened in him a tenderness he had thought lost for decades. As he gently rocked little Emily, he observed Lisa continuing her work with an unwavering dedication he was beginning to admire deeply. Perhaps that daily encounter was exactly what his hardened heart needed to start beating again with purpose. May arrived, bringing an unusual chill to New York City, along with subtle changes in the routine of Golden Haven that only the most observant could notice. Thomas had become one of those people who noticed details, a transformation he himself did not fully recognize. He knew exactly what time Lisa arrived for work, 7:15 in the morning, when she took breaks to feed Emily, 10:30 and 3 in the afternoon. And even what music she hummed softly while cleaning the hallways, always classic Brazilian music, especially Elis Regina and Clara Nunes. "Good morning, Mr. Thomas," Lisa greeted on a cloudy Monday morning, adjusting Emily in the stroller that management had finally allowed her to bring. "This little lady woke up asking for you today." "Asking?" Thomas raised an eyebrow, sitting at his usual desk in the garden. "Oh, in her own way, you know. She kept pointing to the window and saying, 'Vo, which is what she calls you," Lisa laughed, taking Emily out of the stroller. The 7-month-old baby was now sitting up on her own and had developed a striking personality, always smiling but with an attentive gaze that seemed to absorb every detail of the world around her. "Vovo?" Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. She calls me Grandpa." "Yes, I hope you don't mind, Mr. Thomas. I tried to teach her to say your name properly, but it's too hard for her age. If you want, I can—" "No," Thomas interrupted quickly, extending his arms to receive the child. "You don't need to change anything." As Emily settled into his lap, babbling happily and tugging at the buttons of his dress shirt, Thomas watched Lisa organize her cleaning supplies. There was something different about her that morning, a tension in her shoulders, more pronounced dark circles under her eyes. a hurried way of moving. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing how she avoided his direct gaze. "I'm fine, sir. Just a little tired," Lisa replied, starting to clean the nearby tables with mechanical and efficient movements. "Tired how?" Lisa stopped cleaning and looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise and caution. It was rare for Mr. Thomas to ask personal questions beyond basic courtesies about Emily. "Well, Emily is starting to be a handful at night, waking up more often, crying. I think it's her teeth starting to come in," she explained, returning to her work. "And I still do some cleaning gigs after this in private homes to supplement my income. I get home only at 11 at night." "Private homes?" Thomas frowned. "But you don't work full-time here." "I do, but the salary—" Lisa hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. "It's not that it's low, Mr. Thomas. Golden Haven pays on time, and there are benefits. But for me and Emily, alone, I need a little more." The painful sincerity of that confession hit Thomas like a punch in the stomach. Here was a 19-year-old woman, working 2 jobs, raising a daughter alone, and still finding the energy to smile every day and treat everyone with genuine kindness. He, who had spent his life accumulating wealth, had never had to worry about basic issues like paying rent or buying diapers. "Where do you live?" he asked, trying to sound casual while tickling Emily's belly, who giggled delightedly. "In East Side, in a studio apartment that I share with Mrs. Johnson, an elderly lady who takes care of Emily when I'm working at night," Lisa replied, not stopping her cleaning. "It's far from here, but the rent fits my budget. East Side." Thomas knew the area only from the statistics he read in the newspapers. It was one of the most peripheral regions of Greater New York, with high rates of violence and poverty. The image of Lisa making that daily 2-hour commute on public transport, carrying Emily and her cleaning supplies, deeply troubled him. And for those night jobs, who takes care of Emily? Mrs. Johnson herself. She's an angel, accepts payment in food and help with household bills. But I know I'm taking advantage of her kindness, Lisa's voice filled with guilt. 60-year-old woman taking care of a baby all night. It's not fair. Emily chose that moment to grow tired of sitting and began to whimper, reaching her little arms out to her mother. Lisa immediately dropped the cleaning cloth and approached, but Thomas surprised her by standing up and starting to gently rock the child. "Shh, little one. It's okay." "It's all right," he murmured, walking slowly through the garden as Emily gradually calmed down. It was such a natural gesture that he surprised himself. When was the last time he had cradled a child? Probably never. With his own children, he had always left the caregiving to Helen or the nannies. "You have a way with children," observed Lisa, smiling for the first time that morning. "I bet you were a loving father." The innocent comment struck Thomas like a sharp blade. A loving father? He had been many things: provider, authoritarian, demanding, distant, but loving? Never. Not even in the early years of Christina and Robert's lives, when he could have done things differently. "Actually, no," he said with an honesty that surprised him. I was very busy with work. I left everything to my wife." "Oh," Lisa seemed to realize she had touched a sensitive point. "But it's never too late to learn, right? You're being very caring with Emily." At that moment, the strident voice of Mr. Johnson echoed through the garden. "Lisa, what are you doing? You should be cleaning the tables, not chatting with the residents." The administrator approached with long strides, his scowling expression betraying irritation. Lisa immediately straightened up, adopting a defensive posture that Thomas recognized from his decades of dealing with intimidated subordinates. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I was just—" Lisa began, but was interrupted. "You were wasting time on unnecessary conversations. And you, Mr. Anderson," Johnson turned to Thomas with a forced smile, "shouldn't concern yourself with the staff. They have work to do." The condescension in Johnson's tone ignited a fury in Thomas that he hadn't felt in years. It was the same kind of arrogance he had always despised in the business world. Mediocre people compensating for their incompetence through the humiliation of subordinates. The young lady was not wasting time, Thomas said with the cutting voice he used to intimidate opponents in negotiations. She was doing her job very well while we were talking. Perhaps you should focus on managing this institution instead of watching exemplary employees. Johnson's face flushed, but he knew too well who Thomas Anderson was to confront him directly. The Anderson family not only paid one of the highest fees at Golden Haven, but had also made significant donations for renovations and improvements. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. I just wanted to ensure everything was in order," Johnson murmured, visibly retreating. "Lisa, continue with your work." After the administrator walked away, Lisa looked at Thomas with an expression of gratitude mixed with concern. "Thank you for defending me, Mr. Anderson, but you didn't have to. I don't want to create problems for myself or for you." "What problems? That man is a fool who doesn't recognize quality when he sees it," Thomas said, handing Emily back to her mother. "And you weren't doing anything wrong. You were working and being courteous to a resident, which is exactly what's expected. Still, people like me can't afford to cause trouble at work," Lisa said quietly, checking to see if Johnson was far enough away. "I need this job so much, Mr. Anderson. It's the best I've ever had, with benefits and everything. I can't lose it." The vulnerability in those words touched something deep in Thomas. For the first time in decades, he found himself confronted with the raw reality of economic insecurity, something he had completely forgotten since building his fortune. For Lisa, that job was not just a source of income, but a lifeline in a society that offered few opportunities for single mothers without a college degree. "You're not going to lose your job," he said, with a certainty that came from decades of commanding people and situations. "And if anyone tries to create problems for you, come to me." "Why?" Lisa asked, looking at him with genuine curiosity. "Why do you want to help me?" The simple, direct question left Thomas momentarily speechless. Why, really? At first, it had only been the fascination with Emily's smile, the curiosity about the duo that brought life to the quiet corridors of the nursing home. But now it was something deeper, a connection he couldn't explain rationally. "Because you remind me of myself when I was young," he finally said, surprised by his own honesty. The determination, the refusal to bend in the face of difficulties, and because... He hesitated, looking at Emily, who was playing with her own feet. "Because you two have brought something back into my life that I thought I had lost forever." "And what is that?" Thomas smiled, a genuine soft smile that completely transformed his face. "Hope." June brought with it the coldest days of the year in New York City, and with them a noticeable change in the dynamics at Golden Haven. Thomas had become a constant presence in the hallways during Lisa's working hours, always finding a plausible excuse to be around, checking on the rose bushes, reading the newspaper in the library near the service area, or simply getting some fresh air. In the gardens, she was cleaning. The other residents began to comment among themselves about the transformation of the grumpy businessman who now greeted staff by name and occasionally smiled during meals. "Mr. Anderson is different," commented Mrs. Johnson to Dr. Smith during the morning coffee. "Yesterday, I saw him helping Lisa pick up a toy that the baby had dropped. Who would have thought that man had this paternal side?" "Paternal or maternal?" Dr. Smith laughed, stirring his coffee with milk. "Age makes us more sensitive, Amelia, especially when we realize we are closer to the end than the beginning." But what the other residents didn't know was that Thomas was experiencing a silent inner revolution. Each morning brought new discoveries about Lisa that deeply impressed him. He had noticed how she always greeted each staff member by name, from the receptionist to the gardeners, how she shared her snack with colleagues who forgot to bring food, and in particular, how he treated all the residents with genuine respect, regardless of their mental or physical conditions. "Good morning, Mr. Albert," Thomas observed her cheerfully greet an 85-year-old man suffering from advanced Alzheimer's. "How are you feeling today?" "Who are you, young lady?" Mr. Albert had responded with a confused look. "I'm Lisa, remember? I clean your room every Tuesday and Thursday. And this here is Emily, my little girl." Lisa bent down to be at eye level with the elderly man, speaking with infinite patience. "Oh, yes, what a pretty baby," Albert had smiled vaguely. "She has my granddaughter's eyes." "She really does. She must be a very special granddaughter," Lisa had agreed, knowing that Albert's granddaughter lived in Canada and hadn't visited him in over 2 years. Watching that scene, Thomas felt a pang of shame as he remembered how he had always treated employees as interchangeable parts of a machine, knowing only their identification numbers and professional performances, never their personal stories or struggles. It was on a particularly cold Thursday afternoon when the most impactful discovery occurred. Thomas was in his usual armchair in the library, pretending to read a biography of Brazilian entrepreneurs while observing Lisa organizing the books on the nearby shelves. Emily was peacefully asleep in her stroller, wrapped in a crocheted blanket that had clearly been handmade with great care. "Did you make that blanket?" Thomas asked, approaching quietly. "I did," Lisa smiled lovingly, adjusting the blanket over her daughter. "I learned to crochet from my grandmother when I was little. In the early mornings, when Emily was asleep and I couldn't fall asleep, I would crochet. It calms me. It's very beautiful. Your grandmother would be proud." "She would be." Lisa's smile turned melancholic. "She always said that idle hands are the devil's workshop, but hands that create beauty are blessed by God." Thomas was about to respond when he noticed what Lisa was reading. In her hands was a thick, worn book, Fundamentals of Business Management, by Peter Drucker. The pages were filled with pencil notes in the margins, with neat handwriting and insightful observations. "Are you studying?" he asked, unable to hide his surprise. Lisa blushed, quickly closing the book. "Oh, that. I borrow it from the library here sometimes. During breaks, when Emily is sleeping, I read a little bit. Just to not forget what I've already learned, you know." "Can I see?" Hesitant, Lisa handed him the book. Thomas flipped through the pages, impressed with the quality of the notes. They were not scribbles from someone just passing the time. They were insightful observations from someone who truly understood complex business management concepts. "Effectiveness is doing the right things. Efficiency is doing things right," he read one of her notes. "Did you write this?" "I did. It's a quote from Drucker himself. But I noted it down because I thought it summarized well what I see here at Golden Haven," Lisa explained, gaining confidence. "Like, efficiency would be cleaning all the rooms on time, doing everything correctly. But effectiveness would be understanding that each resident has different needs, that some need more conversation, others need more silence." Thomas looked at her with growing admiration. "And do you apply this in your work?" "I try. For example, Mr. Albert, who has Alzheimer's. With him, I always approach slowly, speak softly, explain what I'm going to do. But Mrs. Johnson likes to chat, so I always leave a few extra minutes when I'm cleaning her room. It takes longer, but it makes a difference in their lives." "That's people management," Thomas said, closing the book and handing it back to her. "You're applying advanced management concepts without even realizing it." "Really?" Lisa's eyes sparkled. "I always thought management was just numbers, spreadsheets. Numbers are important, but the heart of management is people, and you have a natural talent for it." At that moment, Johnson appeared at the entrance of the library with his perpetually irritated expression. "Lisa, how long are you going to take with those books? There are 3 rooms waiting to be cleaned." "I'm almost done, Mr. Johnson," Lisa replied quickly, putting the book away and preparing to push Emily's stroller. "And Mr. Anderson," Johnson turned to Thomas with that fake smile he used with the more influential residents. "I hope Lisa isn't bothering you with unnecessary chatter." "On the contrary," Thomas said, adopting that icy tone. He used to dismantle opponents in negotiations. "We were discussing business management concepts. The young lady demonstrates impressive knowledge in the area." "Business management?" Johnson let out an unpleasant laugh. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, but she is a cleaning staff member. She doesn't need to worry about making polite conversation." The silence that followed was tense as the string of a violin about to snap. Lisa lowered her eyes, clearly embarrassed, while Emily began to stir restlessly in her stroller. Thomas felt a fury rising within him, not the explosive anger he felt when closing difficult deals, but something deeper and more personal. "Mr. Johnson," he said, slowly rising from his chair, "in 50 years of business career, I have learned to recognize talent regardless of the position a person currently holds. And I can assure you that this young lady possesses more intelligence and management capability than many executives I have ever hired." "Mr. Anderson, I didn't mean to offend," Johnson began, clearly uncomfortable. "You haven't finished offending me," Thomas cut in. "First, because I determine who I talk to and about what, not you. Second, because your attitude reveals exactly the kind of mediocre management that destroys organizations, the inability to recognize and develop people's potential." Lisa looked from one to the other, unsure whether to step away or stay. Emily, as if sensing the tension in the air, began to whimper softly. "And third," Thomas continued, taking a step toward Johnson, "if I find out that you are creating any kind of difficulty for Lisa because of this conversation, you will have to deal directly with me. And I can assure you that it will be a very unpleasant experience for you." Johnson visibly paled. Everyone at Golden Haven knew that. Thomas Anderson did not make empty threats. His reputation in the business world included stories of executives and entrepreneurs who had been completely destroyed professionally after crossing his path. "Of course, Mr. Anderson, there's no problem at all. Lisa is an excellent employee. That's indisputable," stammered Johnson before quickly leaving the library. As soon as they were alone, Lisa turned to Thomas with a mix of gratitude and concern on her face. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for defending me again, but now I'm really worried. Mr. Johnson may not like this situation and nothing," Thomas gently interrupted, picking up Emily when the baby reached out her little arms to him. "That man is a coward who only knows how to intimidate people he considers defenseless. Now that he knows you have protection, he will behave." "But why do you do this? Why do you get into trouble because of me?" Lisa asked, watching how Thomas naturally cradled his daughter. Thomas was silent for a moment, looking out the library window where he saw other residents walking through the gardens. People who, like him, were living their last chapters, some already forgotten by their families, others merely tolerated out of social obligation. "Because you two reminded me of who I could have been," he finally said, with an honesty that surprised him. "Throughout my life I built an empire, accumulated power, defeated all adversaries. But I never stopped to ask if I was building something that really mattered. And now? Now I realize that the only thing that truly matters is the difference we make in people's lives. And you two have already made more difference in my life in 2 months than I made in someone else's life in 78 years. Lisa was moved, discreetly wiping away a tear that escaped. "You do make a difference, Mr. Anderson. Emily looks for you when she gets home, and I look forward to coming to work because I know I will find you here." "You two are my family now," Thomas said, surprising himself by discovering that those words were absolutely true. "The family I chose, not the one I received by chance at birth." In that moment, under the soft afternoon light streaming through the library windows, with Emily peacefully sleeping in his arms and Lisa smiling through her tears, Thomas Anderson felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: the certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what mattered. And for the first time since Helen's death, he did not feel alone in the world. July arrived at Golden Haven, bringing with it the traditional excitement of the summer festivities. Mrs. Johnson had taken on the organization of the event with the enthusiasm of a show producer, transforming the main hall into a replica of a typical country fair. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, there were makeshift stalls selling hot cider and roasted pine nuts, and a small stage was set up for dance performances. The aroma of sweet popcorn and corn pudding wafted through the halls, awakening nostalgic memories in the residents. "Mr. Anderson, are you going to participate in the festival?" Lisa asked one Tuesday morning while adjusting Emily in her lap. The baby, now 8 months old, had developed a particular fascination with the buttons on Thomas's dress shirt and was systematically trying to pull them off during their morning conversations. "I don't usually participate in festivities," he replied, but there was something in his voice that suggested less conviction than usual. The truth was that, for the first time in decades, the idea of joining a celebration did not seem completely absurd to him. "What a shame," Lisa said, genuinely disappointed. "Emily would love to see you dancing. She gets so excited when she hears music." As if understanding the conversation, Emily clapped her hands and let out one of her characteristic joyful coos, making Thomas smile involuntarily. In recent months, he had become fluent in the peculiar language of the baby, able to distinguish between her different types of cries and knowing exactly how to make her laugh. "And are you going to participate?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I'll be working during the festival, right? Someone has to clean up the mess the crowd will make," Lisa laughed, but Thomas noticed a twinge of melancholy in her voice. "But Mrs. Johnson said I could bring Emily to the hall during the event, as long as she doesn't disturb anyone." The injustice of that situation hit Thomas like a punch in the stomach. Here was a 19-year-old young woman who should be dancing and having fun like anyone her age. But instead, she would be forced to work while others enjoyed themselves, carrying a baby in her arms and trying to balance maternal responsibilities with professional obligations. "That's not right," he murmured. "What's not right?" Lisa asked, pausing her cleaning of the table where he was having coffee. "You should be having fun, not working during the festival." "Oh, Mr. Anderson, work is work. And summer festivities always remind me of home, of the countryside in Alabama where I grew up. My grandmother made the best coconut candies in the region." Her voice became nostalgic. "But it's okay, I'll watch the festival from afar. The important thing is that Emily will be able to hear the music and see the colors." That afternoon, Thomas made a decision that would surprise everyone at Golden Haven, starting with himself. He asked Mrs. Smith to call a men's clothing store at the Mall of America and order a red plaid shirt, dark jeans and leather boots, an outfit he hadn't worn in over 40 years, since his college days when he still attended student parties. "Are you sure about these clothes?" Mrs. Smith asked, clearly intrigued. "Isn't it a bit informal for you?" "It's exactly what I want," Thomas replied firmly. "And also, get me a straw hat and a tambourine." On Friday, the day of the party, Thomas surprised Lisa by appearing in the garden dressed in his full country attire. The checkered shirt was slightly large on him, but the outfit created a noticeable transformation. For the first time since arriving at Golden Haven, he no longer looked like a stiff businessman disguised as a resident, but rather an ordinary man ready to have fun. "Mr. Thomas!" exclaimed Lisa, almost knocking over her cleaning cart. You're dressed for the party." "I am," he said, pulling a small tambourine from behind his back, "and I brought a gift for Emily." The baby, sitting in her stroller, immediately reached out her tiny hands for the colourful instrument, babbling excitedly. When Thomas placed the tambourine in her little hands, she shook it, producing a metallic sound that made her giggle with joy. "But you don't have to do this," Lisa said, clearly emotional. "You don't like parties. You don't need to bother for our sake." "It's not for you," Thomas gently lied. "It's for me. I realized that it's been a long time since I did anything just for pleasure, just for fun. Maybe it's time to remember how that feels." That evening, when the main hall filled with residents, staff, and a few visiting family members, the transformation of the environment was remarkable. The yellow lights created a warm atmosphere. The accordion music filled the spaces, and for the first time in months, Golden Haven pulsed with genuine life instead of merely existing in silent dignity. Thomas caused a sensation by appearing in character. Mrs. Smith almost dropped her cup of hot apple cider when she saw him, and Dr. Smith needed a few seconds to recognize the stern businessman transformed into a festive countryman. "Thomas, my God, you're unrecognizable," laughed Dr. Smith. "It's been so long since I've seen you smile like that." But Thomas's eyes were searching for just one person in the crowd. He found Lisa near the entrance of the hall, trying to balance her professional duties with caring for Emily. She was wearing her work uniform, but had adorned her hair with a colorful ribbon that matched Emily's new dress, clearly made by her during sleepless nights. "Lisa," he approached, ignoring the curious glances from others present. "Aren't you going to dance?" "I can't, Mr. Thomas. I'm working, and there's Emily." She pointed to the baby, who was fascinated by the colorful streamers swaying from the ceiling. "Leave it to me," he said, extending his arms to take Emily. "Go have some fun. Dance to a song." "But I can't leave you with her while I enjoy myself." "Why not? She's my granddaughter at heart, isn't she?" The words came out naturally, as if he had rehearsed them his whole life. "And grandparents take care of granddaughters. That's what we do." Lisa looked at him with tears in her eyes, then kissed Emily's forehead and walked toward the makeshift dance floor. Thomas headed to a chair near the stage, settling Emily on his lap as the lively music filled the air. "Let's watch Mommy dance, little one," he murmured to Emily, who held the tambourine tightly and occasionally shook it to the rhythm of the music. Seeing Lisa dance was a revelation. Away from her daily responsibilities and worries, she transformed into a radiant 19-year-old full of joy. Her movements were natural and graceful. Her laughter echoed above the music, and for the first time since he met her, Thomas saw in her not just a dedicated mother or a hard-working employee, but the girl she still was beneath all the early responsibilities. "She's beautiful dancing, isn't she?" commented Mrs. Smith, approaching the chair where Thomas was seated. "It's a shame that such a young girl has to carry so many responsibilities alone." "It is a shame," Thomas agreed, watching as other young staff members invited Lisa to dance, all clearly enchanted by her beauty and natural charm. "You've grown quite fond of her and the baby," Mrs. Smith observed. "It's lovely to see. Sometimes God places people in our lives when we least expect it, doesn't he?" "Sometimes," Thomas murmured, gently rocking Emily, who had begun to grow sleepy from the noise and movement. The turning point of the night came when the band started playing The Little Melon Chapel, one of the most traditional summer festival songs. Without thinking twice, Thomas stood up and began to sing along, his deep, off-key voice blending with the voices of others present. Emily, excited by the music's vibe, shook her tambourine with renewed enthusiasm. The little melon chapel, it's for St. John, it's for Clove, it's for Rose, it's for Basil, sang Thomas, slowly walking around the hall while cradling the baby. His voice, choked with emotion, drew the attention of everyone present, who stopped to witness that unexpected moment of pure humanity. Lisa, who was dancing in the center of the floor, stopped and turned to look at him. Her eyes filled with tears as she saw that 78-year-old man, dressed in country attire, singing a children's song to his daughter with the tenderness of a true grandfather. It was a scene no one had ever imagined seeing. The most feared real estate mogul in New York transformed into a loving, paternal figure. When the music ended, the hall erupted in warm applause. Thomas, clearly embarrassed by the attention, tried to return to his chair, but was interrupted by Lisa, who rushed over. "Mr. Thomas," she said, impulsively hugging him with Emily still in her arms. Thank you for all of this, for making Emily smile, for letting me be young for a few minutes." "Thank you for what?" he asked, genuinely confused. "You're the ones who gave me back something I thought I had lost forever." "And what is that?" Thomas looked around the hall, at the smiling people, at the music playing, at the colorful lights creating an atmosphere of simple and genuine joy. Then he looked at Emily, who was peacefully sleeping in his arms, and for Lisa, who watched him with affection and gratitude. "The ability to be happy," he simply said. "To be happy with simple things, with small moments, with people who matter." That night, when the party ended and the last guests left, Thomas remained in the hall, helping Lisa pick up the cups and plates scattered across the tables. Still dressed in his country attire, stacking dirty dishes as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he did manual labor for the first time in over 50 years. "You don't have to do this," protested Lisa for the 10th time. "I know," Thomas replied, continuing to clean. "But I want to. It's part of the party, right? Everyone helps clean up at the end." And as they worked side by side, with Emily sleeping in her stroller nearby, Thomas understood that this had been more than just a summer festival. It had been his own rebirth party, the moment he finally left behind the cold, distant businessman he had built over decades and embraced the possibility of being simply a man capable of loving and being loved. The transformation of his hardened heart was far from complete, but that night, singing "The Little Melon Chapel" to a baby who called him Grandpa, Thomas Anderson took his first real step toward redemption. August arrived at Golden Haven, bringing with it the harshest winter in a decade. The once lush and blooming gardens took on grey tones under the constantly overcast sky, and a persistent fog settled over the city, creating a melancholic atmosphere that seemed to permeate even the heated hallways of the institution. For Thomas, however, those cold days brought a discovery that would revolutionize not only his own life, but also the fate of the young family that had captured his heart. It was on a particularly chilly Thursday morning when he decided to explore the library of Golden Haven more deeply. He had always been an avid reader. Helen used to joke that he read contracts over breakfast and business biographies at dinner. But since arriving at the nursing home, he had limited himself to newspapers and business magazines. That day, however, driven by a growing curiosity about Lisa's intellectual interests, he headed to the shelves of management and economics. "Can I help you with something, Mr. Anderson?" asked Mrs. Johnson, the 68-year-old retired librarian who voluntarily organized the institution's collection. "I'm looking for books on business management, specifically those suitable for college students," Thomas replied, flipping through a copy of Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter. "Oh, it must be the same books that Lisa always consults," Mrs. Johnson smiled. "That girl has a passion for management books, always taking notes, always asking if we have any new titles." Does she come here often? Almost every day during breaks, especially when the baby is sleeping. Mrs. Johnson approached a specific shelf, pulling out a yellowed folder. Look at this. She created her own system for summarizing the books she reads. Impressive for someone so young. Thomas took the folder with slightly trembling hands. Not from the cold, but from anticipation. Inside he found dozens of handwritten cards with neat handwriting, each summarizing key concepts from different management books. The notes revealed not only understanding, but sophisticated critical analysis of the topics covered. Hertzberg's two-factor theory, he read aloud. Motivational factors. Achievement, recognition, the work itself, responsibility, advancement. Hygiene factors, company policy, supervision, interpersonal relations, working conditions, salary. Practical application. I observed that at Golden Haven the most satisfied employees are those who feel they make a difference in the lives of the residents. Motivational factor, regardless of salary. Hygiene factor. Impressive, isn't it? Commented Mrs. Johnson, observing the growing look of surprise on Thomas's face. She transforms theory into practical observation with the ease that I rarely see even in graduate students. Thomas continued to flip through the cards, discovering analyses on situational leadership, human resource management, strategic planning, and even advanced concepts in corporate finance. Each note demonstrated not only dedicated study, but a deep understanding of how to apply theoretical knowledge to business reality. Mrs. Johnson, he said, carefully closing the folder, can I ask you a confidential question? Of course, Mr. Anderson. Do you know which university Lisa attended before her pregnancy? Yes, I do. It was at the local community college Paradise campus. She always speaks fondly of the professors there, especially Professor Richard Smith, who taught strategic management, Mrs. Johnson replied. Why do you ask? The name of Professor Richard Smith hit Thomas like a lightning bolt. He had known Richard for over 20 years. They had worked together on various consulting projects before the professor chose an academic career. He was one of the most respected economists in New York, known for accepting only exceptionally talented students in his extension courses. Mrs. Johnson, I need to use the phone. It's urgent. 20 minutes later, Thomas was on a phone call that would completely change his perception of Lisa's potential. Richard, this is Thomas Anderson. I need information about one of your former students, Lisa Johnson, studied management at the local community college. Lisa? Of course, I remember her. Richard's enthusiastic voice echoed through the phone. One of the brightest students I've had in 40 years of teaching. Why do you ask? Has something happened to her? She works at the place where I'm currently living. I wanted to know more about her academic performance. Thomas, that girl, was a prodigy, top grades in all subjects, actively participated in study groups, did a research project on microfinance for small entrepreneurs that was simply brilliant. The admiration in the professor's voice was evident. I invited her to be a teaching assistant for the strategic management course last semester. She had the potential to be an exceptional executive. Did? Well, she stopped coming to classes halfway through the course. I later learned that she got pregnant and had to drop out to work. Ricardo's voice became melancholic. It was a tremendous loss for the group and for the university. I even tried to contact her to offer a full scholarship to return, but she had changed her phone number and we lost touch. Full scholarship? Yes. Along with other professors, we managed to approve a special scholarship for exceptional students in situations of social vulnerability. It was perfect for her case, but by the time we got the approval, we didn't know how to find her. Thomas remained silent for a few seconds, processing the magnitude of that information. Lisa was not just a bright young woman striving to improve her life. She was an exceptional talent whose journey had been interrupted by circumstances, yet she still kept the flame of knowledge alive through self-study in the library of a nursing home. "Ricardo, does that scholarship still exist?" "It does. In fact, we have an open spot for the next semester." "Why do you ask?" "Because I found your lost student." That afternoon, Thomas eagerly awaited Lisa's arrival for work. When he saw her pushing the stroller with Emily, now a 9-month-old baby, who was already crawling and showing a special fascination for anything that could be put in her mouth, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness he hadn't experienced since his first big deals. "Lisa," he called, waving from his usual table in the garden. "Hi, Mr. Thomas. How did you spend the night?" she greeted cheerfully, taking Emily out of the stroller. The baby immediately stretched her arms toward him, babbling "Daddy" with increasing clarity. "I did well, thank you," he said, receiving Emily in his arms. "Lisa, I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course. Did something happen?" The immediate concern in her voice revealed how she had learned to expect problems instead of good news. "On the contrary, something very good happened." Thomas took a deep breath. "Yesterday, I spoke with your former professor, Ricardo Sampaio." Lisa's expression instantly transformed. Surprise, nostalgia, and a pang of pain quickly passed across her face. "Professor Ricardo? Why did you talk to him?" "I found out that you had studied with him, and I wanted to know more about your academic journey," Thomas explained. "Lisa, did you know that he tried to offer you a full scholarship to finish your degree?" "Full scholarship?" She sat heavily in a nearby chair, as if her legs could no longer support her. "No, I didn't know. When I stopped going to classes, I changed my phone number, kind of disappeared from the map. He said you were one of the brightest students he had in 40 years of teaching." Tears began to roll down Lisa's face. "Professor Ricardo was very important to me. He was the first teacher who really believed in my potential, you know. He said I had natural strategic vision." "And you do. I saw your notes in the library." "You saw my notes?" She blushed, clearly embarrassed. "I did, and I was impressed. Lisa, you not only understand complex management concepts, you can apply them to reality with a naturalness that many experienced executives lack." "But that doesn't change anything, Mr. Thomas. I have Emily. I need to work. I don't have time or money to go back to studying. What if?" "I told you there is a way." Lisa looked at him with a mix of hope and skepticism. "What way?" "The scholarship Ricardo wanted to offer you still exists. There is an open spot for the next semester," Thomas said, watching her eyes widen. "And I can help with practical matters, caring for Emily during classes, transportation, educational materials." "Mr. Thomas, I can't accept that. It would be too much, too big of a favor." "It wouldn't be a favor," he interrupted firmly. "It would be an investment in the future of an exceptionally talented person who deserves the opportunity to realize her potential." Emily, as if sensing the emotional intensity of the conversation, chose that moment to snuggle into Thomas's lap and close her little eyes, emanating that absolute trust that only children can demonstrate. "But what about work here? I need the salary," Lisa murmured, struggling between dream and pragmatism. "I'll talk to Johnson. I'm sure we can arrange a flexible schedule that allows you to study and continue working," Thomas said, with the confidence of someone used to solving seemingly insurmountable problems. "Why would you do this for me?" Lisa asked, wiping her tears. With the back of her hand, Thomas looked at the young woman in front of him, 19 years old, a single mother, a cleaning staff member, but with an intellectual potential that could take her anywhere she wanted to go. Then he looked at Emily, sleeping peacefully in his arms, representing a future full of possibilities. "Because you both gave me back the ability to dream," he he said simply, "and now I want to help realize your dreams." At that moment, under the grey winter sky of New York, two lives intertwined irreversibly, that of the retired businessman who had discovered a new purpose, and that of the young mother who had just seen a door open to the future she had always desired but never dared to hope for. September arrived at Golden Haven, laden with tensions that accumulated like storm clouds on the horizon. The discovery about Lisa's academic past and Thomas's plans to help her resume her studies had created ripples that spread far beyond the walls of the institution. The news had reached Christina and Robert through Johnson, who, feeling threatened by Lisa's growing influence over the wealthiest resident of the establishment, decided to take drastic measures. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the storm erupted. Thomas was in his usual routine, playing with Emily in the covered garden while Lisa organized the cleaning supplies, when he heard determined footsteps echoing down the hallway. He immediately recognized the sound of Christina's high heels, always precise, always hurried, always laden with business authority. "Where is my father?" Christina's sharp voice echoed through the reception even before she arrived. Emily, now 10 months old and extremely sensitive to changes in atmosphere, stopped playing with the wooden blocks that Thomas had bought for her and looked towards the sound, her expressive little eyes showing unease. "It's okay, little one," Thomas murmured, but his own voice carried a tension that the baby immediately sensed. Christina appeared at the garden entrance like an imposing figure, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, her upright posture and hardened expression painfully reminiscent of the very personality that Thomas had cultivated over decades of ruthless business. At 45, she had become a female version of her father in the worst aspects: ambitious, cold, unable to show vulnerability. "Thomas," she said, using his first name as she always did, "we need to talk. Now." "I'm busy," he replied calmly, continuing to stack blocks for Emily, who clapped when the tower fell. "Busy playing grandpa with the cleaning lady's daughter?" The venom in Christina's voice was unmistakable. "You've completely lost your mind." Lisa, who had stopped working upon hearing the hostile tone of the conversation, approached discreetly. "Mr. Thomas, can I take Emily? I think it's better if I leave." "No," Thomas said firmly, rising from the chair where he had been sitting. "You are part of this family just as much as anyone else. Stay." "Family?" Christina let out a bitter, unpleasant laugh. "Thomas, you must be senile. This woman is an employee who is taking advantage of your loneliness to squeeze money out of you." "Watch your words, Christina." Thomas's voice took on that icy tone he usually used to intimidate adversaries. "You're talking about people who truly care about me." "Care? She just wants to pull a reverse gold digger," Christina exploded. "I heard you're planning to pay for her college, arrange special hours, turn her into some sort of protégé. That's ridiculous." Lisa visibly paled, taking a step back as if she had been slapped. "Mrs. Christina, I never asked anything from your father. I never asked for money. I never asked for help." "Of course you didn't ask directly." Christina turned to her with fiery eyes. "You smart ones know how to manipulate lonely old men. First, you win them over with the cute child, then with sad stories, and in the end, you get the inheritance." "Enough!" Thomas's shout echoed through the garden, causing Emily to start crying. Immediately, he picked the baby up, rocking her gently. "Enough, Christina, you've crossed every line." "I crossed the line? You're the one being manipulated by a girl who could be your granddaughter." Christina pointed accusingly at Lisa. "Robert and I will not allow you to be fooled like this. We've already spoken to our lawyers." "Lawyers?" Thomas felt a fury rising in his chest, not the cold anger of business, but something much more primitive and protective. "You're threatening me with lawyers." "We're protecting you from yourself." Christina crossed her arms. If necessary, we will go to court to prove that you are not of sound mind to make important financial decisions." The silence that followed was tense as the string of a violin about to snap. Lisa cried silently. Emily squirmed restlessly in Thomas's arms, and Christina maintained her defiant posture, clearly convinced she was doing the right thing. 65 years, Thomas finally said, his voice low but laden with an authority that made Christina instinctively step back. "What? You are 45. I'm 78. That means you have been an adult for 33 years. And during those 33 years, how many times have you called me just to chat? How many times have you visited me without discussing money or solving problems?" Thomas continued, each word carefully measured. "Thomas, this has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with it," he exploded. "You abandon me in this place, visit once a month out of obligation, treat me like an inconvenient burden, and now you have the audacity to question my mental sanity when I finally find people who care about me. We care about you. You don't care, no." Thomas's voice became melancholic. "You care about my money, my inheritance, your social reputation. But me? About the man I am, what I feel, what I need. You never cared." Christina opened her mouth to protest, but he interrupted her with a hand gesture. "Do you know how many times Lisa has asked me how I spent the night? Every day. Do you know how many times she worried when I had the flu, when I was sad, when I needed someone to talk to? She and Emily brought me back to life, Christina. And you want to destroy that for what? For greed?" "It's not greed, it's protection," Christina insisted, but her voice had lost some of its initial conviction. "Protection from what? From happiness? From purpose? From love?" Thomas gently rocked Emily, who had stopped crying and was now watching him with those attentive eyes. "You want to protect me from being loved and loving back? You barely know this woman. I know her better than you, who are my children for 4 decades, Thomas replied. "I know her story, her dreams, her struggles, her determination. I know every expression of this baby, every babble, every smile. They are part of my life in a way that you never were." Lisa, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke with a trembling voice. "Mr. Thomas, I think it's better if I leave. I don't want to cause problems between you and your children." "You're not going anywhere," Thomas said firmly. "This is your home just as much as mine." "Home?" Christina let out another bitter laugh. "Thomas, this is a nursing home, a transition place before death. It's not a place to create fantasy families." "It may be a nursing home for you," Thomas replied, looking around the garden where so many happy mornings had happened. "For me, it's the place where I learned to be a grandfather, where I discovered that I can still make a difference in someone's life, where I found a purpose for my later years." "And what happens when you die? What happens to your family then?" Christina asked with calculated cruelty. "Is she going to look for another rich old man to manipulate?" The question hit Lisa like a slap. She bent over, sobbing openly, while murmuring, I never wanted anything from your father other than affection. I just wanted someone to care about us." Seeing Lisa cry awakened in Thomas a protective fury he had never known. It was the same feeling a father has when he sees someone threatening his child, multiplied by decades of repressed love that had finally found a worthy object. "Christina," he said, stepping toward his daughter with determined strides, "you have 10 seconds to apologize to Lisa, or our conversation ends here. Forever." "I won't apologize for protecting my father from a gold digger." "Then you've made your choice." Thomas turned his back on her. "You can leave and take your lawyers, your threats, and your greed with you. From today on, you are no longer welcome here." "You're going to regret this, Thomas," Christina shouted, walking toward the exit. "When you find out who this woman really is, when you realize you've been fooled, you'll regret it." The only thing I regret, Thomas said without turning around, is having raised children incapable of recognizing love when it's right in front of them. After Christina's stormy exit, the garden fell silent, broken only by Lisa's muffled sobs and the worried babbling of Emily, who reached out her little hands to her mother. "Mr. Anderson," Lisa said through tears, "maybe she's right. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I should—" "Lisa." He approached and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Look at me." She raised her tear-streaked face. "In the last 6 months, you have given me more joy, more purpose, more reason to live than I have had in the last 10 years, he said with absolute sincerity. "If that is selfish, then so be it. I would rather be selfish with people who love me than altruistic with people who see me as a burden. But what if she is right about me? What if deep down I am taking advantage?" "Taking advantage of what?" "My time, my attention, my affection." Thomas smiled softly. "Lisa, those are the only things I have to offer that truly matter, and you receive them with such gratitude, with so much love, that you make me feel rich in a way that money never could." Emily reached her little arms out to Thomas again, and when he picked her up, she nestled her little head against his chest with that absolute trust that only children can show. In that moment, watching the baby in his arms and the mother at his feet, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. The storm had passed, but it had left behind a more united family and a love stronger than any adversity could destroy. October brought a twist that no one had anticipated. 3 weeks after the explosive confrontation with Christina, Thomas received a legal notice that left him perplexed and furious in equal measure. Robert and Christina, fulfilling their threats, had filed a civil commitment lawsuit, claiming that their father was suffering from progressive cognitive decline and was no longer capable of managing his assets or making important financial decisions. "Mr. Anderson," said Dr. Smith, the criminal lawyer Thomas had hired in the early hours after receiving the citation, "I need to be direct with you. This type of lawsuit, when filed by legitimate children, can be very complicated. They have considerable financial resources and have hired the firm Smith & Associates, which specializes in family law." Thomas was sitting in his suite at Golden Haven, with Emily playing on the rug at his feet and Lisa nervously organizing some papers on the table. The atmosphere was charged with tension. Everyone knew that this legal battle could destroy the fragile happiness they had built together in recent months. "And what is our position?" Thomas asked, observing how Emily was trying to stack wooden blocks with adorable concentration. "Technically, they need to prove 3 things. That you have some type of mental deficiency, that it compromises your ability to discern, and that this incapacity makes you vulnerable to manipulation," Dr. Smith explained, consulting his notes. "The problem is that they have already presented circumstantial evidence." "What evidence?" "Testimonies from employees at Golden Haven claiming drastic changes in your behavior, medical records showing episodes of high blood pressure, and mainly—" Dr. Smith hesitated, glancing discreetly at Lisa. "Your intention to finance the studies of a young attractive employee." Lisa visibly paled, hugging herself as if trying to protect against invisible blows. "Dr. Smith, I never asked anything from Mr. Anderson. I never induced him to do anything." "I know, dear," the lawyer said kindly, "but unfortunately that's not what matters in court. What matters is how things can be interpreted by a judge who doesn't know the real circumstances." "And Johnson?" Thomas asked, a suspicion growing in his mind. "He testified claiming that you exhibit erratic and inappropriate behavior for your age, that you have developed an unhealthy obsession with an employee and her daughter, and that you make impulsive decisions without considering the consequences." Dr. Smith read directly from the document. "That bastard," Thomas murmured. "He's being paid by my children." "Probably. But again, that will be difficult to prove." At that moment, Emily chose to knock down her block tower and clap her hands, laughing joyfully. The contrast between the child's innocence and the gravity of the situation hit everyone present like a punch in the stomach. "Dr. Smith," Lisa said with a trembling voice, "what if I step away? If I leave Golden Haven, if I stop having contact with Mr. Anderson, would that help his case?" "No!" Thomas's response was immediate and categorical. I would rather lose all my wealth than lose you two. Mr. Anderson, be realistic. If you lose this case, they will take control of your assets. They will be able to commit you to any place they want. They will destroy any chance we had of being together," Lisa argued, tears streaming down her face. "At least if I step away now, you maintain your freedom." "Freedom for what? To go back to being the bitter and lonely man I was before you came into my life." Dr. Smith observed their exchange with professional interest. "Mr. Anderson, may I ask a personal question? Why are these people so important to you?" Thomas picked up Emily, who immediately snuggled against his chest, making that sound of contentment she always produced when she was in his arms. "Doctor, I built a business empire, amassed wealth, defeated every adversary that came my way," he began slowly. "But until I met Lisa and Emily, I had never experienced something that all the money in the world cannot buy. Being loved for who I am, not for what I possess." "And Lisa? How does she demonstrate that love?" "She treats me like true family," Thomas replied, looking affectionately at the young woman who had revolutionized his life. "She cares about my health, takes an interest in my days, shares her joys and sorrows with me, and more importantly, never in 6 months of living together has she asked me for a single cent." "Is that true?" Dr. Smith asked Lisa. "It is indeed," she replied, wiping her tears. "I earned my salary honestly, took care of Emily and Mr. Anderson. He became the grandfather she never had, the father I lost too soon." Dr. Smith took notes for several minutes, then closed his notebook and looked seriously at Thomas. "Mr. Anderson, I will be frank with you. This case may be difficult, but it is not impossible. We have some strategies." "What are they?" "First, we will request an independent psychiatric evaluation to prove your full mental capacity. Second, we will thoroughly document your relationship with Lisa and Emily, demonstrating that it is a genuine family bond, not manipulation. And third," he hesitated, "we will expose the true motivations of your children." "How?" "We will investigate their financial situation, their spending, their debts. If we can prove that they are motivated by greed rather than genuine concern, it will significantly strengthen our position." 2 weeks later, revelations began to emerge. The investigation commissioned by Dr. Smith discovered that Robert had made disastrous investments in the financial market and was over $2 million in debt. Christina, in turn, had taken on a considerable bank loan to open her own law firm, using shares of her father's company as collateral. "They are drowning in debt," Dr. Smith explained during a meeting on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "Your inheritance is not just desire, it is an urgent necessity to save their professional careers." "Sons of a gun," Thomas murmured, rocking Emily, who was dozing in his arms. "Helen must be turning in her grave." "But we have more good news," the lawyer continued. "The psychiatric evaluation has been completed. Dr. Marina Smith, one of the most respected psychiatrists in New York, confirmed not only that you possess full mental faculties, but also that you show notable improvement in indicators of psychological and social well-being since establishing family bonds with Lisa and Emily." "Really?" Lisa asked, who had become progressively quieter and more worried in recent weeks. "Absolutely. She even recommended that these bonds be preserved as an essential part of preventive treatment against depression and social isolation in the elderly. At that moment, as if she understood she was being discussed, Emily opened her little eyes and smiled at Dr. Smith, extending her chubby little hands to him. The lawyer, who had arrived at Golden Haven as a skeptical professional, completely melted. "She is irresistible, isn't she?" he laughed, tickling the baby's feet. "Any judge with half a brain will see that this child sees Mr. Anderson as a true grandfather." "Dr. Smith," Thomas said, "what are our real chances of winning?" "Before the investigations, I would say 50%. Now, with all the evidence we have collected, 80%, the lawyer replied confidently. "But you need to be prepared for a nasty battle. They will try to destroy Lisa's reputation, question her motivations, exploit the age difference between you." "Let them try," Thomas said, his voice carrying echoes of the business authority he had wielded for decades. "I have already destroyed adversaries far more powerful than my own children." "Mr. Anderson," Lisa gently interrupted, "are you sure it's worth it? All this fighting, all this confusion. Maybe it would be better." "Lisa," he interrupted her, placing Emily in her stroller and stepping closer to the young woman. "Do you remember what you asked me on the first day we talked?" "No." "You asked why I was helping you. And I replied that you brought me hope," he said, gently holding her hands. "Now it's my turn to fight for that hope, to fight for our family." "But what if we lose?" "If we lose, at least we will have fought for what matters, and I would rather spend my last years fighting for love than submitting for convenience." Dr. Smith observed that scene, the 78-year-old businessman holding the hands of the 19-year-old young woman while the baby slept peacefully between them, and knew he was fighting for something far more important than a legal case. He was fighting for the preservation of a family that had formed not by blood ties, but by bonds of the heart. "Then let's go to war," he said, closing his briefcase, "and we will win." November arrived at the family court with a palpable tension that transformed the austere room into an emotional battlefield. Thomas Anderson, wearing his best navy suit, the same one he had worn in his greatest business victories, was sitting next to Dr. Smith, watching as Christina and Robert occupied the opposite side of the room with his lawyers in dark suits and determined expressions. Between them, decades of family grievances and millions of dollars at stake. Judge Patricia Smith, a 50-year-old woman known for her strict impartiality and experience in complex family law cases, presided over the hearing with the solemnity the moment demanded. Beside her, Dr. William Johnson represented the interests of the state in protecting vulnerable seniors. "This court is convened to hear the civil commitment petition filed by Christina Anderson and Robert Anderson against their parent, Mr. Thomas Anderson," the judge announced, her voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "The petitioners allege progressive mental incapacity and vulnerability to manipulation. Let the first witness be presented." Christina and Robert's attorney, Dr. Richard Smith, a burly 60-year-old man with a reputation for being relentless in family disputes, called Mr. Johnson as the first witness. The administrator of Golden Haven had dressed meticulously for the occasion, but his nervousness was evident in the way he constantly adjusted his tie. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Smith began, "as the administrator of Golden Haven, have you had the opportunity to observe behavioral changes in Mr. Thomas Anderson?" "Yes, Doctor," Mr. Johnson replied, carefully avoiding looking in Thomas's direction. "In recent months, Mr. Anderson has developed behavior inappropriate for his age and social standing." "Can you be more specific?" "He began frequenting service areas during work hours, developed an obsession with a young staff member and her baby, and made impulsive financial decisions, such as offering to pay for the staff member's college." Dr. Smith immediately stood up. Your Honor, I request that it be noted that the witness is using clearly biased terms, such as obsession and inappropriate, without technical basis for such assessments. Granted, the judge agreed. Let the witness stick to observed facts, not personal interpretations. Mr. Johnson continued to describe the past few months in a distorted manner, presenting every gesture of affection from Thomas as evidence of mental deterioration, every moment of happiness as irrational behavior. When he finished, Dr. Smith stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Johnson, the defense attorney began, what is your academic background for assessing human behavior? I'm an administrator, psychology, psychiatry, geriatrics, any medical field? No, sir. So your opinions about Mr. Anderson's behavior are just that, lay opinions, correct? I suppose so. Dr. Smith approached the table where the evidence was organized. Mr. Johnson, have you received any payment or benefit from Mr. Anderson's children for providing this testimony? I didn't understand the question. It's simple. Did the petitioners offer any type of financial or professional compensation in exchange for your testimony against Mr. Anderson? The silence that followed was eloquent. Mr. Johnson nervously looked at Christina and Robert's lawyers, who remained impassive. Answer the question, the judge ordered. They mentioned the possibility of recommending me to other institutions managed by their business group. A murmur swept through the room. Dr. Smith smiled discreetly before continuing. So your testimony is motivated by personal interest? It's not quite like that. Thank you. No further questions. The next witness was Dr. Marina Santos, the psychiatrist who had evaluated Thomas. An elegant 45-year-old woman with impeccably styled grey hair and glasses that gave her an air of intellectual authority. Dr. Marina, Dr. Smith asked, after extensive psychiatric evaluation, what is your conclusion about Mr. Anderson's mental state? Mr. Anderson presents full mental faculties, preserved logical reasoning, excellent memory for his age, and completely intact judgment, she replied, with professional confidence. Furthermore, I have observed significant improvement in emotional well-being indicators in recent months. What do you attribute this improvement to? To the establishment of healthy emotional bonds with people he considers family. It is common and advisable for seniors to develop familial relationships based on affinity and mutual care, especially when blood ties are deficient. Dr. Smith stood up for cross-examination. Doctor, do you not find it strange for a 78-year-old man to develop such intense bonds with a 19-year-old staff member? Absolutely not, Dr. Marina replied firmly. Intergenerational bonds are extremely beneficial for the mental health of seniors. What would be strange and concerning is for a man of his age to remain isolated and without significant emotional connections. But what about the socio-economic difference? Does it not suggest possible manipulation? On the contrary, my observations indicate that Miss Lisa never solicited financial benefits and, in fact, initially resisted Mr. Anderson's offers of help. This contradicts any pattern of manipulative behavior. At that moment, Dr. Smith made a discreet signal, and the doors of the room opened. Lisa entered carrying Emily, now 11 months old, dressed in a light blue dress and white shoes. The baby looked around the serious room curiously until she spotted Thomas, at which point her little eyes lit up and she reached out her arms toward him, babbling happily, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" The spontaneous and genuine reaction of the child had a visible impact on everyone present. Even Christina and Robert seemed momentarily taken aback by Emily's obvious joy at seeing her grandpa. "Your Honor," Dr. Smith said, I request permission for a brief demonstration. Granted, the judge agreed, clearly touched by the scene herself. Thomas stood up and walked over to Lisa, who handed him Emily. The baby immediately snuggled against his chest, making that contented sound she always produced when she was in his arms. Then, with the naturalness of someone who had repeated that gesture hundreds of times, Thomas began to softly sing "The Little Melon Chapel," while gently rocking the child. The silence in the room was absolute. Emily completely relaxed, closing her little eyes and smiling as her grandpa sang to her. It was impossible to feign or manipulate that level of mutual trust and affection. "As you can see," Dr. Smith said softly, "this child recognizes Mr. Anderson as a paternal figure. This is a real family, based on love and care. That's theater, a performance to impress the court." Christina stood up abruptly. "Thomas," his voice cut through the air, firm yet heavy with sadness, "you have a granddaughter, your granddaughter, and you never even asked her name. She is not my granddaughter. She is the child of some employee you barely know." "Emily," Thomas said, ignoring his daughter's hostile tone. "Her name is Emily. She was born in January, loves music, is starting to walk, and calls me Grandpa when she sees me. She is my heart's granddaughter, and I am the only grandfather she knows." "This is ridiculous." "What is ridiculous," interjected the deep voice of Dr. William Johnson, the prosecutor, "is two people trying to separate an elderly man from a family that clearly loves him and is loved by him." Everyone turned to the prosecutor, surprised by his intervention. "Your Honor," Dr. Johnson continued, "the prosecution is convinced that this case does not aim to protect Mr. Anderson, but rather to secure early access to his inheritance. The evidence presented shows that the petitioners have urgent financial motivations, while the people who supposedly manipulate him have never requested economic benefits." "Dr. Johnson," protested Dr. Smith, "the interests of the state." "The interests of the state," the prosecutor cut in, "are to protect the elderly from abuse and neglect. In this case, the ones abusing Mr. Anderson are his own children, trying to separate him from the people who bring him happiness and purpose." The judge observed the entire scene with special attention to the natural interaction between Thomas and Emily. It was evident that this was not a performance. The baby was genuinely relaxed and happy in his arms, and he held her with the ease of someone who had cared for children his entire life. "Mr. Anderson," she finally said, "would you like to make a final statement?" Thomas handed Emily back to Lisa and stood up, adjusting his suit with the dignity of someone who had run companies for decades. "Your Honor, I built my life around contracts, businesses, acquisitions. I always believed that success was measured in numbers, in properties, in power," he began, his firm voice echoing through the room. "But at 78, I discovered I was completely wrong." He looked directly at Christina and Robert. "My children want my money. Lisa and Emily want my company. My children visit me once a month out of obligation. Lisa talks to me every day out of affection. My children see me as a burden to be managed. Lisa and Emily see me as family to be loved." Thomas's voice slightly choked. "Your Honor, if I truly have little time left, I want to spend it with people who make me happy, who give purpose to my days, who allow me to be useful again. I want to be Emily's grandfather. I want to help Lisa achieve her dreams. I want to be part of a real family." He turned to his children one last time. "You will always have a financial inheritance when I die, but Lisa and Emily have given me something much more valuable, an emotional inheritance while I am still alive." The silence that followed was broken only by Emily's joyful babbling, who did not understand the gravity of the moment, but felt the emotion in the air and tried to ease the tension with her innocent smiles. Judge Patricia observed everyone present before announcing her decision. "The court will recess for deliberation. The ruling will be delivered in the next session." But everyone in the room knew that the real decision had already been made. Love had spoken louder than greed, and a family built by the heart had proven to be stronger than blood ties poisoned by financial interest. December arrived at Golden Haven, bringing not only the warmth of the summer, but also a complete transformation in the lives of everyone involved in the legal battle that had become much more than a property dispute. Judge Patricia's ruling had been categorical. The request for guardianship was denied due to lack of technical and legal grounds, with severe criticism directed at the petitioners for attempting to manipulate the judicial system for personal economic gain. Thomas was sitting in his favorite chair in the main garden, watching Emily take her first wobbly steps among the rose bushes he had helped plant. The baby, now a full-year-old, had become a determined little girl exploring the world with the voracious curiosity typical of her age, always under the watchful eye of the grandpa, who had become her constant shadow. "Look at that, Mr. Thomas," Lisa exclaimed, pointing to her daughter, who managed to walk 5 consecutive steps before sitting heavily on the grass. "She's almost running. Our champion." Thomas smiled, extending his arms for Emily to try to reach him. "Come here, little one. Show Grandpa how you walk." Emily looked at him with that intense concentration she assumed before attempting something difficult, then stood up, supporting herself on a rosebush, and took 6 determined steps toward Thomas's open arms. When she reached him, she was met with enthusiastic applause and affectionate kisses that made her giggle with joy. "Perfect," said a familiar voice behind them. "That scene is beautiful." Everyone turned to see Professor Richard Smith approaching with a radiant smile, carrying a folder of documents and a bouquet of yellow flowers. "Professor Richard," Lisa exclaimed, quickly getting up. "You did it." "We did it," he corrected, handing her the folder. "Lisa Johnson, I am pleased to inform you that you are officially enrolled in the administration program at the local community college for the 2026 semester, with a full scholarship and schedules adapted to your family needs." Tears immediately welled up in Lisa's eyes as she hugged the folder as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. After months of uncertainty, legal battles and threats, she finally saw her academic dream materializing once again. "But how was it possible to arrange special hours?" she asked. "Let's just say we have a patron." "Very influential," winked Professor Richard, looking significantly at Thomas. "Someone who convinced the administration that investing in your potential would benefit the entire university." Thomas tried to assume an innocent expression, but the mischievous smile playing on his lips completely betrayed him. During the weeks following the trial, he had discreetly worked behind the scenes, using his network and business influence to create the perfect conditions for Lisa's return to studies. "Mr. Thomas," said Lisa, approaching him with Emily in her arms, "did you do this for us?" "I did it for myself too," he replied honestly. "I want to see you graduate. I want to be at your graduation ceremony. I want to help Emily with her homework when she gets older. I want to be part of all the achievements of this family." "And you will be." Professor Richard pulled up a chair and sat with them. "Thomas, I need to tell you some news. The university has approved the creation of the Thomas Anderson Academic Excellence Scholarship, a permanent program to support talented students in situations of social vulnerability." "Really?" Thomas straightened in his chair, genuinely surprised. "Absolutely serious. Your donation will allow 10 students per semester to have the same opportunities we are offering for Lisa. It's an educational legacy that will last for decades." At that moment, Mrs. Smith appeared, walking quickly through the garden, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mr. Thomas, Lisa, you need to come see this." Intrigued, everyone headed to the main hall of Golden Haven, which had been decorated with colorful banners and balloons. A long table was filled with sweets, snacks, and an elaborate birthday cake shaped like an open book. "Surprise!" shouted around 20 residents and staff who had hidden behind the furniture. "But it's nobody's birthday today," Lisa said, confused. "It's our family's birthday," explained Mrs. Smith, radiant. "It's exactly 6 months since you three officially became a family. We decided to celebrate." Dr. Smith approached, carrying an old camera. "And we want to capture this moment for posterity. Thomas, you have completely transformed since they came into your life." "We all have transformed," added Mr. Johnson, who had been experiencing increasingly frequent moments of lucidity since Emily had become a constant presence in the nursing home. "This girl has brought life to this place." Emily, as if understanding she was the center of attention, clapped her hands and produced a series of babbles that everyone interpreted as approval of the party. Thomas picked her up and walked to the center of the hall, where everyone present formed a circle around them. "My friends," he began with a voice choked with emotion, "when I arrived here in March, I was a bitter, lonely man, convinced that my life was over. I saw myself as a retired businessman waiting for death in a comfortable place." He looked affectionately at Lisa, who was beside him holding his free hand. "But this extraordinary young woman and this miraculous baby taught me that life can begin anew at any age, that family is not defined by blood but by love, and that the greatest success a man can achieve is to make a positive difference in the lives of others." "Mr. Thomas," Lisa murmured, moved. "Let me finish," he smiled. "Lisa, you gave me back my purpose. Emily, you taught me to smile again. And all of you," he looked around the circle of friendly faces, "showed me that a home is not a place, but a feeling." Professor Richard approached with a sealed envelope. "Thomas, since we're making revelations, I have one more surprise. The documentation for Emily's legal adoption has been approved by the juvenile court." The silence that followed was absolute. Lisa looked from the professor to Thomas with wide eyes of shock. "Legal adoption?" she sighed. "If you agree," Thomas quickly said, "I would like to officially be Emily's grandfather, not to replace any of your rights as a mother, but to ensure that she always has security, education, and someone who loves her unconditionally." Lisa began to cry, but they were tears of pure joy. "Of course I agree, absolutely." The celebration that followed was a genuine celebration of love, transformation, and new beginnings. Emily was passed from lap to lap, receiving affection from all the residents who had become her honorary aunts and uncles. Thomas and Lisa danced a slow waltz, while Professor Richard played the piano, and for the first time in decades, Golden Haven pulsed with the energy of genuine life instead of merely existing in silent waiting. As the night wore on and the guests gradually departed, Thomas found himself alone. In the garden with his new family, Emily was peacefully asleep in his arms while Lisa picked up the toys scattered across the grass. "Lisa," he said softly. "Yes? Thank you. Thank you for what, Mr. Thomas? You are the one who completely changed our lives. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your family, for giving me the chance to be a grandfather, to be useful again, to love and be loved." His voice broke slightly. "I had given up believing I could be happy again." Lisa approached and kissed his forehead tenderly, then kissed the forehead of her sleeping daughter. "We are the ones who should be thanking you, Grandpa, for giving us a family, for believing in our dreams, for loving us when no one else did." As they walked together back into Golden Haven, Thomas carrying Emily, Lisa holding his free hand, they passed by the library where it all had begun. The shelves still held the business books that Lisa had secretly studied, but now she would have access to so much more. A complete education, a promising future, and a solid family foundation to build her dreams. "You know what's most amazing about all this?" Lisa said, stopping in front of the window that overlooked the moonlit gardens. "What?" "That it all started with a spilled coffee. A baby's smile. Thomas chuckled softly, careful not to wake Emily. The best things in life always start with coincidences that we later realize were no coincidences at all. Was it destiny? It was love waiting to happen, he said, looking out the window at the city of New York that stretched beyond the walls of the nursing home. Love that transforms, that redeems, that gives meaning to everything. And that's how Thomas Anderson, at 78 years old, discovered that his life was not ending, it was just beginning in earnest. With a granddaughter who called him Grandpa, a daughter of the heart who would fulfill all his academic dreams, and a renewed purpose that would last for the rest of his days, he finally understood that true wealth is not measured in properties or investments, but in the ability to love and be loved unconditionally. The heart that he believed was irreparably hardened by time and loss had been completely transformed by the power of genuine love, a living testament that it is never too late to start over, to choose a new family, and to discover that the greatest legacy we can leave is not material possessions, but lives positively touched by our love. And in the Garden of Golden Haven, under the stars shining over New York, 3 generations walked together toward the future. The grandfather who found his redemption, the mother who would realize her dreams, and the child who would grow up knowing that family is built with love, not just blood.